NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, presents Aeronautics and Space Report. This is the story of the upcoming flight of Apollo 15, as told by the men who will fly the 12-day mission.
The primary mission objective of Apollo 15 is to land at a site on the moon called the Hadley Rill and collect documented samples from various geological features within the area of the landing site. We might also add that a primary objective is to remain in lunar orbit for 6 days with the command and service modules, gathering scientific data around the moon with the scientific instrument module in the command and service module.
40-year-old Dave Scott, the man in charge on Apollo 15. This will be Scott's third space flight. He flew previously on Gemini 8 and Apollo 9.
Well, of course, I'm probably the oldest rookie in the program, but looking forward very eagerly to this trip, because I think it's going to be certainly one of the greatest missions to date, and certainly one of the most complicated.
Sharing the workload on the moon's surface, lunar module pilot Jim Irwin, 41.
The experiments that we're carrying are basically geochemical experiments, and with these experiments we hope to be able to map the surface of the moon, correlating that with the rocks that we get from the surface of Hadley Rill and with some of the rocks that we've had on previous flights.
Orbiting the moon while Scott and Irwin are on the surface, 39-year-old Al Worden, command module pilot. Approximately 3 hours after launch from the Kennedy Space Center, the crew of Apollo 15 will head out 240,000 miles toward this spot, the Hadley Rill, located in the foothills of the moon's Apennine Mountains.
The landing site for Apollo 15 at the Hadley Rill is a very dramatic site. We feel that it'll be quite spectacular when you get to see it on television while we're there. It's essentially on a flat plain surrounded by mountains on one side and a rill, or a meandering gorge, we might call it on the Earth, on the other side. The mountains to our east and north and south range anywhere from 11,000 to 15,000 feet high, and the rill, or the gorge in front of us, is like a canyon, and it's about 1.3 kilometers across and 1,000 feet deep. So it has some very significant terrain features, and something I'm sure that everybody will be impressed with, at least from the standpoint of visual observation when we get back.
Astronauts Scott and Irwin will travel farther and gather more samples for scientific study than any moon landing team so far. They will be able to do this because of the lunar rover, a four-wheel battery-operated vehicle.
Well, the rover weighs about 500 Earth pounds, which is slightly more than 80 pounds on the moon. So you can see it's a rather light vehicle on the moon. As a matter of fact, if we had to change a tire, one of us could hold it up, although with the wire wheels it won't be necessary. The rover is folded. Its wheels fold in flat to the body, and the body folds up in two pieces, and it's stowed in Bay 1 on the left side of the front of the limb.
Now, as far as the drive on the rover itself, the control for it is all built into this one stick right here. It has the brake. The brake is the rearward position of this stick. Brake's released now. To go forward, you merely push the stick, or the throttle control forward, and it maintains that position, should maintain that speed depending on the terrain. To go backwards, you release the reverse inhibit and just rotate the stick aft. And then to turn, you just move the stick to the left or right like a roll input in an aircraft, and that will turn the wheels and you'll move in that direction. The instrumentation for the vehicle is all presented on this one panel in terms of amp hours, voltages, then temperatures on the batteries and on the drive motors. We also have a display here for our navigation system, which will be most helpful. on our extended traverses from the LEM, because on EVA-2 we'll be moving away as much as almost 8 kilometers from the lunar module.
Traveling at speeds of 5 miles per hour or more, Scott and Irwin will be able to explore roughly 25 miles of the lunar surface as a result of their added mobility. There'll be television, too.
The television has been developed to be carried on the rover and controlled remotely from the ground. So every time we make a science stop, we enable the television within the communication systems on the rover, and the ground will be able to point the TV in any direction within 360 degrees, elevate it and depress it, and also zoom it. So you'll perhaps have a better view of many things than we will, because you'll be able to watch both of us at the same time.
During their 67-hour stay on the moon, Scott and Irwin will move out of the lunar module and onto the moon's surface for 3 major work periods of extravehicular activity called EVA. It is during this time that they will explore and set up scientific experiments.
On EVA-1, for instance, we'll be going down to the front first, doing our geology investigation down there along the Apennine front, and then over to the Rill. And then coming back to the LEM, we'll be unstowing the ALSEP packages and then deploying the ALSEP about 300 to 500 feet west of the LEM. I'll be doing the bulk of the deployment while Dave is doing the drilling operation.
Well, the lunar drill is part of what we call a heat flow experiment. First, we were able to drill a hole deep into the lunar surface and implant temperature sensors, which enable us to measure the profile of heating, if you will, from depth below the surface to the surface. This will give scientists a signature of what the surface consists of and how its heat flux changes. They can extrapolate this into possibly an explanation of the origin and the history of the interior of the moon. The second aspect of the drill is a core, or a deep penetration of the surface and gathering of material some 9 feet below the surface in an extended core which is brought out intact, showing the profile of the surface to depth.
Al Worden, the command module pilot, is responsible for the major science experiments conducted while in lunar orbit and on the return trip to Earth. As they travel toward the moon, a panel door on the side of the service module will be jettisoned, exposing the cameras and scientific instruments, 10 in all. These include a gamma-ray spectrometer to measure the chemical composition of the moon's surface, a panoramic camera, a mapping camera, and the sub-satellite, a satellite to be placed in orbit around the moon shortly before the crew heads earthward. The sub-satellite should stay in lunar orbit for a year.
The sub-satellite is what I would term a passive experiment. And when I say passive, I mean in the sense that it's not powered in flight. We eject the sub-satellite from the command service module. It goes into an orbit which is then only perturbed by the gravitational attraction of the moon. The sub-satellite is a particles and fields satellite. The main effort in this particular satellite is to measure the particles field around the moon, such as the plasma flow, solar rays, magnetic field, magnetic particles, and this type of thing around the moon. Because of the way the satellite is built and because of the way the data is transmitted back to Earth, we get a very nice byproduct from the satellite, and that is that we can track the sub-satellite with radar, with radio signals from the Earth, and we can position it precisely in its orbit about the moon, and we can watch the perturbations of the orbit of the sub-satellite, eventually arriving at a very good model of the gravitational field of the moon. And there's been a lot of talk about heavy spots on the moon, the so-called mascons. Because the sub-satellite is completely unpowered, it's completely at the mercy of this gravitational field, and any heavy mascon that it sees perturbs its orbit. And we can calculate this. We can measure it and then calculate that gravitational field.
It is Worden who will go outside the spacecraft at about 16 hours after leaving lunar orbit on the way to Earth. The purpose is to retrieve film from the 2 cameras located in the scientific instrument bay. At the Manned Spacecraft Center, Houston, Worden practiced this maneuver underwater. We asked him to describe his planned trip outside the spacecraft.
Once the hatch is opened, we'll take the TV camera and the 16mm data acquisition camera, mount that on the hatch, the command module hatch, with both cameras pointed toward the service module where I'll be working. Once that's accomplished, then I'll go very slowly down the handrails to the service module, staying away from the reaction control system engines or quads, which are just off the side of the path of the EVA. Go down to the service module, get situated in the EVA restraint boots, which are located on one side of the service module. And once in that position, then I'll remove the thermal and contamination covers from the pan camera cassette first. Once they're removed, I'll pull the cassette out of its bay, tether it to the left wrist, and then very slowly come back the handrails, back to the command module, stow the cassette inside the command module, where Dave Scott will keep track of it and hold it until the end of the EVA. Then I'll go back down the handrails and essentially repeat that process with the mapping camera cassette, tethering it to my left wrist and bringing it back into the command module.
Scott, Irwin, Worden. If all goes on schedule, they'll lift off from the Kennedy Space Center, Florida, in late July. Here, they summarize their feelings about space and this mission.
Well, I think it's always important for man to have a new challenge, maybe a physical challenge, but certainly a challenge to his imagination. And I think that the fact that we're going to the moon is just another step forward. I think we have to go to the moon. We have to explore it and really learn how to explore another planet.
The space program is one of those things that this country has, which is really could be and probably is for a great number of people in the country a driving force. It's expanded technology immeasurably, computer industry, hardware industry, equipment, anything you want to mention, even management, has benefited tremendously from the space program. And I think that we really need to keep this kind of technology going if we're going to be leaders in the world.
We feel if we can learn the history of the moon, we can extrapolate it to the history of the Earth, and perhaps with this knowledge discover the manner in which our resources were created and the manner in which we can discover new resources and preserve what we have. The overall result being a continuation of what we have on the Earth and enabling us to better understand our own planet and the manner in which we have to preserve it in order to sustain man.
This special Aeronautics and Space Report brought to you by NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration.